Welcome to CPAC. I'm Ed Morrissey of HotAir.com, interviewing Jessi Melton, who is a candidate for Congress for Florida's 22nd District, running against Ted Deutch, who I believe is the vice chair of the House Judiciary Committee, and who was important in the impeachment process. We might get to that, but Jessi, before we get started, first off, welcome to CPAC.
Thank you.
And what are your issues in this election? What are your top issues in this election?
Well, if I have to condense them to a few.
Right, yeah.
One of the first ones, I would say, Second Amendment. We've got to go on the offensive to defend the Second Amendment. We should never even be discussing imposing on our Second Amendment rights to protect ourselves against tyranny. Also, term limits. My opponent is a career politician, and there are many of them in there. They're self-regulating, and they've become more dependent on government than the entitlement programs that they push.
Right.
So we've got to impose term limits because their spending has gotten completely out of control. Which leads me to the next point, which is balancing the budget. We got to starve the beast. These guys should be using our economic output, which is significant, in our GDP, to invest and leverage that for a return to fund the things that we need funded for the American people, not exploiting the taxpayer. So that's another one, balancing the budget. And human trafficking. We just launched something that's been near and dear to my heart for a long time, which is a war on human trafficking. The two of the root causes, I think there are a lot of initiatives out there that seek to treat the symptoms, but the two most important perpetuators are open borders, number one.
Right.
We know that human trafficking is a $150 billion annual criminal industry. It's the largest growing in the world. Open borders, when people come in illegally, they're not protected by our labor laws.
Right.
So they're almost certain to be exploited by sex slavery, labor slavery, or some form of servitude. And then the other aspect is I just launched a proposal. I'm going to be seeking to push a bill that would make it illegal to pay for performance in a pornographic film, because I believe that selling pornography is human trafficking, perpetuates child pornography, and it is absolutely destroying our families and our women and our children.
So, Jessi, I understand that you've even had some former porn stars come out and support you in this effort about trafficking. Tell us a little bit about the reaction that you're getting, which is, I think, a little surprising.
Yeah, I knew it was going to be controversial because I am a constitutionalist.
Right.
So, but Jenna Jameson came out immediately in support of the bill. She
used to be the top performer in the porn industry, Jenna Jameson, yeah.
Right. So if anybody's got a leg to stand on, she does, I think it's important to realize that there are people that have a vantage point that other people don't have. The victims have a different vantage point.
Well, it's interesting, too, because she was one of the women who were sort of hailed as an example of the self-actualizing, self-producing, businesswomen who, the pornography industry was lifting up. I mean, for years, people would say, well, it can't be sex trafficking because, look, Jenna Jameson is wealthy. She's producing her own stuff, and she's making a mint off of this, and so, yeah, I mean, I was really surprised when I just heard this just a few minutes ago. I was very surprised to hear that she has made that much of a transition on this.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them are, and they don't realize until later in life what damage it's done. Because I would venture to say that 99%, if not 100%, of adult film stars have endured some form of either sexual abuse, human trafficking as a minor,
Right.
Whether it was when they were very young or when they were a teenager, 15, 16 years old. In Jenna Jameson's case, I had read her autobiography a while ago, before she became very conservative, and she was talking about how the abuse that she had experienced as a young teenager when she was first developing, which is just rampant. I mean, it's very
Right.
normalized, and what happens is, because it happens in the teenage years sometimes, they wear this label of this is just me, I'm just
Right.
And really they were still a minor, and they were still young, a young girl who didn't know what was out there to really kind of imprison them. And she was imprisoned in it for a while. I mean, she was being paid, but she was imprisoned in it, and she was a victim of drug addiction. She overdosed, I believe, at least once. And it did a lot of destruction to her physical body and her life. And so she's somebody who lived it. And at some point, God willing, if they haven't already committed suicide or died from an overdose, then they might be saved from it and able to heal and recover. But this industry is so evil, and it perpetuates child pornography and just so many things that are just absolutely vile. And as a constitutionalist, which I know makes it very controversial, I actually believe that not eradicating this industry is unconstitutional, because our government is instituted among men to protect our right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Right.
And we're allowing this industry and this evil force to take so much of our American, people into imprisonment.
Right.
We're not protecting them, and so I know it's a deep issue for some folks to understand, but selling pornography is trafficking of humans.
Right, right. All right, so let's talk about Florida's 22nd District. Tell us about the people in the 22nd District. Tell us who they are and why Ted Deutch is not representing them properly in Congress.
Well, 22nd District starts in Boca Raton in Palm Beach County, and then it runs down the east coast of Broward, down to Fort Lauderdale, and it actually runs out to Coral Springs and Parkland, which is where Marjorie Stoneman took place, the tragedy at Marjorie Stoneman. So a lot of my supporters are parents from Parkland. The Promise program, are you familiar with the Promise program?
Very familiar with the Promise program and the role it played in the Parkland shooting, yes.
Right, so there's just a lot of lack of guidance. There is a lot of Democratic leadership in the Board of Education and in Broward County, my incumbent opponent, and they've just neglected our school district. Our children, bullying is rampant, child suicides are high there. There were, in and around the Marjorie Stoneman shooting, people don't talk about this, but there were 2 teen suicides at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. So it's just a very broken district, and the Democrat Party has been neglecting it. The Board of Education, there's a lot of money that they've gotten for these programs, the Promise program, which has done nothing but perpetuate the brokenness there, and it's just filtered into their pockets. It's awful.
So this is the type of thing that Ted Deutch isn't really addressing for Florida 22 voters. Tell us a little bit about yourself, about what you do and your background and how that fits in better with the modern Florida 22.
Sure. So I'm a small business owner. I grew up a very low-income family. We lived in a double-wide trailer and at one point a basement of an apartment complex.
Wow.
I had my son when I was in college, and I was kind of facing a road of deciding, okay, I can go down a life dependent on government, or I can, roll up my sleeves, work hard, and achieve the American dream. And that's what I did. I am in the wireless infrastructure business. I have a small wireless infrastructure development firm, so we build cell phone towers. And I've been able to be very prosperous in the last couple of years under this administration's policies and the tax cuts, and the ability for everyone, including my clients, to be able to spend more and build more and develop more and create more, which is what our republic is all about.
Right.
And so I've developed those skill sets, and I'm in a position where I'm able to, sacrifice my personal life and time building my business to be able to serve my country. And my opponent is a career politician, and he's dependent on this government. He can't function without his government role, and that's not the way it's supposed to be. You're supposed to attain skills from life of building a business, go in, serve, and then go back.
Right.
So that's what I want to bring. I want to bring my experience, and I want to bring the gifts that I've been given, and I want to bring my voice. And I'm a fighter.
And you know that. I mean, you're surrounded by fighters here. In fact, I was joking around with Jessi a little bit right before we went on, right before we did this interview, that if she could just bring in some wireless infrastructure and get us all reliable internet here at CPAC, you'd have 30,000 foot soldiers for your campaign in Florida. But yeah, I mean, that is part of what is missing is, and they talked about this at the Democratic debate, the presidential debate, was that there's a whole bunch of people on that stage that never made a payroll, right?
Right.
That never had to hire people.
Never negotiated insurance.
Never negotiated insurance.
Yeah.
And this is Michael Bloomberg who was saying this, who's who's problematic in some of those areas anyway. But he had a point, right? Is that what you have here is you have basically a governing class that has never had anything to do with the private sector, has never had to have anything to do with the private sector.
Right, exactly, and we are a self-governing people. That's what made us so beautiful. Government was instituted among men only to preserve our inalienable rights.
Right.
You know, not to become this big force of handouts. So it's supposed to be ruled by us. George Washington, as you know, was the commander of the military when we declared our independence, and they wanted him to be king. And he said, no, this isn't what America's all about. We don't want the tyranny we had in Britain. We don't want the infringements on our rights like we had in Britain. And they convinced him. He did become president. He served for 8 years, and then he left.
Right.
And they kind of twisted his arm into even being president. And he set the precedent for term limits.
Right.
Which we have for the president, but we don't have for Congress. And, you know, the preamble tells us that we want to obtain a more perfect union. So our job should just make our union more perfect, and term limits, I would say, is something that we could certainly add to the Constitution.
I think we could. Jessi, where can people find out more about your campaign and how to help you out?
So they can go to votejessi.com, and that's Jessi with an I, Jessi, and sign up there. I'm very active on social media. I'm active on Instagram under Jessi Melton. I'm active on Facebook. I'm active on Twitter, Vote Jessi 2020. And just reach out to me. I try and get back with everyone. I usually am able to do that. Please contribute. You know, anybody contribute if you can.
Absolutely.
I am up against a deeply entrenched opponent. He just endorsed Michael Bloomberg, so he's got Bloomberg who just built an office in Parkland in the district. So they've got a lot of money, but Bloomberg's got nothing against Trump, and Deutch has got nothing against me. So
there you go. That's what voters want to hear. Jessi Melton, thank you so much, and good luck with your campaign this fall.
Thank you for having me, Ed.
I'm Ed Morrissey from HotAir. We'll have more from CPAC later today.